right. Bam. And get my slides ready. And welcome to the How to Governance session. A walkthrough of how the DAO functions, and in particularly, this information comes from the BanklessDAO Handbook. I should put the I'll have to find the bam, here it is. Drop the link in the chat here. To the bDAO Handbook. Put it in the slides real quick in case folks want to reference this information or go back to it. It's the Notion page for this workshop. And how to governance. Essentially, the mission of BanklessDAO is to go bankless by creating user-friendly on-ramps for people to discover decentralized financial technologies through education, media, and culture. Our vision is financial independence, decentralized work, and creative freedom accessible to all. Our main values of the DAO is education, integrity, decentralization, and culture. Our governance, essentially, decisions regarding governance, treasury, projects, and proposals are through a democratic process using our forums and Snapshot and lots of discussion in Discord, sometimes seshbot polls. Bank holders on Snapshot ratify decisions through off-chain votes using the Snapshot platform. This is where we formalize and ratify, DAO-wide decisions. Routine decision making happens informally in the Discord channels, generally through seshbot polls, and even in the forums when decisions or information requires a level of consensus that requires a lot of BanklessDAO members or DAO members from different groups. Essentially, we have soft consensus. A lot of times these are called temp checks, but essentially soft consensus gauges support from the community via Discord polls or general posts in our forums. Oftentimes, the soft consensus temp checks will be used to better develop proposals or initiatives or interest in projects before a more formal proposal and consensus is needed, usually for funding. Formal proposals go through two stages on the DAO-wide level. First is usually a draft of your proposal, and then based on the feedback from that proposal, the proposal gets posted on the BanklessDAO forum. Again, there's usually a chance for additional comments, and then if needed, that proposal may be good as is, especially if it's for a project or organizational unit, or it may require more formal process to change the actual DAO governance. We call those BanklessDAO improvement proposals, or bDIPs for short. So essentially there's grant proposals, which is requesting funds, funding proposals, and then improvement proposals, which are actually changes to the handbook and or constitution. Each member in the forums has one vote. Forum voting is not token weighted or gated. Forum proposals require 70% approval to pass for funding proposals. Oftentimes there's requirements for proposals depending on how much bank is being requested for funding. So if it's less than 1 million bank of funding, it should be posted in the forums for 1 week. If it's greater than 1 million bank, it should be posted in the forum for 2 weeks. And there are quorum requirements for grant funding and for the improvement proposals. Generally, quorum is defined as the minimum number of voters based on amount of bank. Actually, this makes no sense. Gonna add a comment. Boom. Snapshot. So once votes pass in the forums, if they require a snapshot vote, then it's taken to snapshot. Essentially, once a proposal for funding meets quorum, it goes through the grants committee and through the grants committee process. This may or may not include going to snapshot. Snapshots are gated. They are gated by 2 token holders. You need at least 1 bank token to vote in snapshot proposals. And snapshot proposals, the more bank you have, the more power or weight your vote has. And generally, proposals run for 7 days in snapshot and require more than 66% approval.
Quick question, Ernest.
Yep.
Go back 1 slide for me real quick.
Yeah, is this factual?
The off-chain voting tool,
Yep.
wouldn't it be an on-chain voting tool? Because it requires, it's all saved on-chain and it requires the bank token to participate in?
Yeah,
Seems to
but
me like
isn't
Sesh would be off-chain.
isn't the
Oh, look at that. They define themselves as an off-chain voting platform.
yeah, that's the
All
biggest
right.
complaint about Snapshot is that it's technically off chain.
Today I learned.
It is, there is validation, but it's technically off chain.
All right. Well, thanks for checking on that. Learned something new.
Yeah, I know, and I didn't know. Yeah, I got to confirm that too. Um, I, I'm gonna add that we just need to check and update quorum.
I think that'll just be something along the lines of dynamic quorum, or grants committee has a quorum chart or something.
Yeah, this may change next season. We just want to check that. Um, I don't know
7
if,
days is right.
yeah, and does Snapshot have, is it always the same quorum approval or, right, is funding different from bDIPs?
Good question. I do not know the answer. My gut says it would stay the same, but with the voting population growing and shrinking the way that it does, I wonder if that's not true.
So we just need to update that. Boom, boom, boom. But very important to understand quorum. Quorum is a consensus-based mechanism. Once snapshot is passed, if a proposal um, passes and their grants request is accepted and goes through the grants committee review process, well, then the DAO Treasury / Constitution. This may happen through a governance department next season. It's one of the current discussions going on in the forums. Um, but essentially, once the DAO decides to make a decision, one of the departments have to operationalize that decision and update any governance docs that it may relate to. And there's a nice format for the improvement proposals in order to be able to do that. Thank you, CFI. Um, so what are the different, it's kind of the decision-making process of the DAO. It's also generally the same model that's used for decision-making within guilds and departments, except that the subunits within the DAO rarely use snapshot and rarely use weighted voting. Most of the decision making within actual subunits themselves are actually decided by those subunits. Again, with kind of the same values as the DAO, but every organizational unit is somewhat different and has their own unique culture. And so we see this play out differently in different guilds and, projects. Guilds are essentially talent pools for projects. And according to our constitution or handbook, they are professional associations of subject matter experts. Their goal is to focus on onboarding, education, and community building. And guilds often submit funding proposals to the grants committee every season. Guilds are self-managed units within the DAO. Typically, they are work groups or work streams, and I would add that they are, cross-functional in nature. They may possess their own internal multi-signature wallets and develop their own internal governance. So we have guilds, we have projects. Projects are mostly autonomous. Um, they're designed to make an impact and accomplish a specific goal. Proposals must be submitted through the same DAO governance process as other projects or as other units within the DAO. Most projects submit funding requests on a seasonable basis if they, remain active and continue towards their goal. Um, some projects start within guilds or within departments, and if they develop, can become their own project, not dependent on a guild or department. Projects don't necessarily have some type of revenue model necessarily associated with them. Projects that do have revenue models associated with them and that create content, social media. Again, we are a media DAO, and so a common type of project within the DAO that generally has some type of revenue, aim are called media nodes. These are projects that specifically create media content and share the BanklessDAO brand. Generally, they strive to have that revenue share agreement, but we're still figuring out how to do that. And some media nodes are still struggling to figure out, how to generate a revenue. Again, these media nodes may follow their own governance documentation and election procedures and, have their own rules for modification of their governance documents. We also have, does this say, we need to add departments, especially I think, since it seems like we got some definitions going on in the forum regarding departments. But essentially, departments are they're units that are essentially taking care of specific operations or functions within the DAO. We spent the last year and a half figuring out, what kind of operations we can expect to, be a DAO and to be a media company. And mostly these expected functions or work streams that have come up in various areas throughout the DAO. Um, we're in agreement that these functions are going to persist, and so there are departments to kind of operationalize those functions and do the expected work. Currently have a marketing department, education department, ops department, and treasury department, and there is discussions on a governance department as well. Another organizational unit within the DAO is the grants committee, which elections for grant committee members are currently going on, nominations. Um, Grants committee usually consists of 5 to 7 members. Grants committee has their own review process for how they review projects or grants for projects and units, and quorum, and they have their own quorum requirements for how they agree as well. Their quorum is usually 5 members. They usually have, 2 leads, and they generally serve a 6-month term. They approve the seasonal funding of guilds and projects, and they're also responsible for vetting the organizational units as they submit their funding um, and KPIs to be tracked. Election of the grants committee is under the governance of the DAO, and the guidelines are listed in the handbook, as well as their Notion page. And that is essentially how to governance in BanklessDAO. Any questions? This is a really short, sweet, simple presentation. But happy to answer folks' questions.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I need excuse me. I need a bit more explanation on snapshot voting. Because I know I've voted in snapshot. I think twice. Yeah, twice. But honestly, I don't really have a total idea about it. All I know is that what is said is it's token weighted, and the number of banks you have, the higher the power of the vote and all of that. So I don't really understand how it works basically. So I just need a bit more explanation on snapshot.
Yeah, so essentially, let's see what we got. So essentially, there's lots of different ways to vote. We call these voting strategies. In the US, we have what folks like to call a representative democracy, which means that we don't directly vote in elections, but we elect people to vote and represent us in the national elections. And, we're familiar with, in the US, when we go to vote, we're one person, we vote as one person. There's no legal way for me to get more than one vote. Um, that's one type of voting strategy. Without getting, too deep into the US election system, and cooperatives that have been around for a long time, cooperatives often form, and, again, people have, essentially a cooperative company, and then the workers of that cooperative all have one person, one vote, for a lot of the governance around, a business cooperative. you know, we're familiar, maybe with nonprofits. Nonprofits often have a board of directors that makes all the decisions. And so there's actually no democratic process for, the members of a nonprofit to vote. Um, and with blockchain and with tokens, it allows us to create many more different types of voting strategies. So, a common voting strategy in elections is called ranked choice voting. When you have more than two people running in an election, um, you can actually vote for your preferences, of one over another. Um, in the blockchain world, in Gitcoin grants, there's a voting strategy, um, that's not one person one vote. It's called quadratic voting. It's not um, ranked choice voting. They have their own like algorithm and formula for deciding how funds get dispersed, to different projects in their grant thing. So in BanklessDAO, we have the bank token. The bank token is, a labor token. We work for it, but it's also a voting token. And essentially, instead of one person, one vote, um, our voting system or voting strategy, not really voting system, but our voting strategy is that whenever you vote, however many bank tokens you have, that's the strength of your vote. So we can look back at this shielded voting, and we can see that, I voted with 107,000 bank. Ice Cool voted with 2 million bank. And so Iced Cool's votes are worth 20 times more than my votes. Um, if I got the math right. And at Thinker, just underneath a million bank, his votes are just under half, as powerful as Iced Cool. And in Snapshot, we can go down and see, who's voted, um, how much bank they voted with. And ultimately, 55,000 bank, you know, 53,000 bank. We have people voting Web3 Chef, whoever they are. They're voting with 11,000 bank. And since this poll is, essentially has either, vote for, it's a test, but you either vote for number one or you vote for number two, and then it totals up the amount of bank in all those votes and presents you with, you know, who won the vote. Um, and so in this example, 6.3 million bank was used to vote for vote number one, and 4 million bank was used to vote number two. Again, this was a test. It's not really a actual decision, but had this been some type of proposal, the vote number one, would have won the proposal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does. It does.
Yep. Now, it's much different than in guilds where we have people that's one person, one vote. Um, that makes some interesting things happen. Like if a bunch of people want to pay people for not doing work, one person, one vote, majority rules, they can do that. In a weighted voting system, less likelihood that those people that want to get paid for not doing work would have a large number of bank. And so the hope would be the people that have been around for a while and have more bank would vote against paying people that didn't do work. And, you wouldn't have kind of weird dynamics pop up in governance.
No, all right, all right. I think I have a much more better understanding of what it is.
Yeah. And it's basically, just each bank token gives you a vote. And essentially, what the bank token governs are the decisions in regards to the treasury, the DAO treasury. Um, because basically, if you're not requesting funding or you're not requesting to use the bank brand in some way, your proposals don't need to go to Snapshot. Your proposal may not even need to go to the forum. You might just need to find a small group of people that agree to move forward in a certain direction and do it. Um, you can, if it doesn't depend on funding, if it doesn't depend on using, the DAO resources in, any weird way, um, you don't have to go through these formal processes. So, like we can see with the BDIP number two about going to UTC timing, 14 million bank approved switching to UTC. I can't believe that there were some people that voted to reject UTC time. um, Trying to see, we don't really have any contentious votes that are like split in half. Um, and then I think, if the one comment that was in the slides is correct and that snapshot votes need at least a 66% approval, we could see that in the shielded voting test poll that the vote to approve vote one didn't quite get the 66% threshold. So this could tell us that there still needs to be more consensus or more, discussion about this proposal in order to try to get a more definitive vote, for a specific type of action. Um, Any other questions? If not, we can call it a day.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ernest.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Have a happy new year.
See you in a few minutes.
Oh, yeah. Nope. Nope. Shut the fuck up.